Outer Orange.
Results? Results! Let's go ahead and go through them. Привет, yeah. So here we have a Fuzzy Paradox once more with our beautiful pie charts as per usual. So just to start us off, we got the standard side of Toronto happening. This is the top 8 breakdown. We had 3 Gandiva, 1 Ballista, 1 Zorga, 1 Jet, 1 Hexa Orb, and 1 Magister Blaster. I will personally tell you, Magister Blaster is actually a pretty good deck. It's not like the best deck in the format, obviously, but it can perform really well because of the 15k base, the triple drive, the crit pressure, and on top of that, the rear guards being mainly grade 2s. So, and you can replenish board pretty easily on top of also retiring your opponent's board. It overall has like a lot going for it. Your early hand's actually really good usually because you can draw a lot off of the early stuff. If you're running the cycler, which you should be, you'll be kind of cycling through your deck a lot. You don't really care about soul that much. You can also get away with running the Regalius piece, the one that lets you Soul Blast to put the 25k extra shield. By the way, makes 30, including the MOB's effect, because you'll usually be doing a grade 3. It's a lot of shield that you're just popping down, by the way, and then you're also negating the over trigger power, which is really nice as well. So just overall, the deck's actually really well. I've personally been testing it for quite a bit now. I think I really started aggressively testing it when I saw DF have a top with it sometime earlier this year, which basically was right after all the new, basically after Festa Collection dropped for JP. He was testing it, and I will agree with him. It's actually a relatively good deck. This is what top 4 looks like. No Ballista here. You know, the deck's not perfect. You know, it's gonna brick, and it's probably might have bricked. Maybe something went wrong. Maybe got critted out of the game. Who knows what happened there? But this also makes sense too. We got the first place Gandiva, second place Zorga, third place MOB, and fourth place Gandiva again. Everything on here makes a lot of sense. The only one that I will question it all the time, is Zorga. I think Zorga's really strong. Don't get me wrong. The results are definitely there. For me, my personal taste, I feel like the deck lacks some stuff in comparison to other meta decks. I feel like if you're competing, there are better decks to choose. However, the deck is super fun to play. Really great. Has a lot of setup. Has a lot of cool stuff. Doesn't really care about the retire stay as much, but it does care about your hand. You know, your hand is very impactful in Zorga, and I feel like your hand just really suffers into like the early game, and you can just get rolled out by Ballista pretty quickly. I think that's the biggest downside to the deck. I do want to show you guys the MLB list. It's actually very similar to the one that DF took. I don't think it might even be the exact same. This is the MLB list. It is basically what I expect it to look like. Blaster Blade in the right line because you want to do the triple drive more often, so you have Blaster Dark as your rear guard. Main focus, you have the Cycler, which helps you both stack your deck but also go through more cards to see more pieces. The Soul Blast part, but for the draw, is actually very impactful in this deck. We have the Maple. Maple is a really good just in case scenario to just keep bringing out a rear guard without having to sacrifice hand. It's just really good, especially into matchups like Gandiva. She gets retired, she'll come back next turn. This deck is very reliant on Persona, just a little fun fact. So you really want to Persona as much as possible just because it helps the columns like a lot. And there's been situations where I've thought if maybe the other Regalius piece actually might be better, but I have stuck to this one myself as well. I think we talked about Drilling for the Soul. We have Emmeline in here. Emmeline is obviously very impactful as you find a bunch of blasters, but I think once you find Persona too, but I think the biggest thing is actually that 5k that she gets, because you can always put her behind in the back row and then have a blaster attack in the front row, and as you're going through all the blaster attacks and then shoving some into soul and then bringing them out with a grade 1, she just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So eventually the column that she's on just gets huge, and the numbers just get crazy. Like you can easily hit over 40, 50, 60k, sometimes even 70k with this, especially on the triple drive. You know, you're going to stack that column like crazy, because that's the only column you won't be able to stack since the Blaster Blade and Blaster Direct come out after battle. So yeah, she just does some crazy stuff. So just overall, like probably this card just helps a lot with this deck. It keeps the deck going. Obviously we have the promo in here. Without the promo, this deck really doesn't work. You really need this promo like really badly. So at the end of it has to be the center circle, by the way, and your Vanguard has to be Magister or Blaster, so keep in mind. So at the end of the battle that this unit boosted, you can counter blast, choose up to 1 Blaster Blade and 1 Blaster Dark, and your soul and call into the same column. So basically you can choose one, choose the other, and then call a column. You can choose to call one, by the way. You don't have to call both. And then the other thing is, if your opponent's grade 3 or greater, all your grade 2 units get boosted. Basically you have the Emily in the back row boosting 1 column with probably a Blaster Dark or a Blaster Blade, and on this side you'll have a Blaster Blade in the front, a Blaster Dark in the back, and because you retire some stuff too, the Blaster Dark will gain power, and then the Persona, these numbers just get huge. And that's basically like the setup you want, and this in the back row obviously, and yeah, that's just basically the deck. And then the 2k with the Blaster, Magister Blaster actually makes this column with her a 23k column, which is also really nice because you're going 23 with the triple drive, and yeah. Have fun guarding, I have a crit, and all that great stuff. So you always need to PG it basically. And then running a lot of draws, obviously you kind of want to see a lot of your deck. The heals really help here. I just want to show you guys because I do have a lot of knowledge in this deck. I do have it completely built out. I have been testing it. I've actually been considering competing with it. Not 100% set on that yet, but it has been a thought. So this is the Zorga list. Again, I've been trying to understand I guess it's because of the blitz down here. A lot of people have been running the regular PGs over the blitz PG, and it's actually really interesting to me that people have been doing this. I don't fully understand why. I get it why, because they value this over the other one, obviously, because they want to play this one over the Sanctitude, and the Sanctitude is offline if you have, you know, a bunch of the embellishment drinks in your hands, so you can't really play the Sanctitude if you play this. I will say now that Jet is dying off, the Sanctitude is less needed. You can kind of play around the Sanctitude. You can play without the Sanctitude if you're not, since Jet is not as popular. I will say, if you know you're going to face Jet, I feel like it's almost mandatory they have Sanctitude. It's just too good. The other thing I don't really like about these PGs is that they actually work a lot worse in Zorka than they do in other decks, because of the fact that you could just sit there with a handful of orders, and guess what? You can't guard with your PGs as a one cost block just because you're ordered. If you have a whole head of orders, which does happen, by the way, sometimes you just get in this really awkward position where you just can't PG properly. Like, you can PG, but sometimes you'll get stuck where you can't PG with a one cost because you have too many orders in hand. You can't guard with those. Because you can't guard with those, you don't fulfill the condition as commonly as you would, as often as you would want to with like other decks. Something I've noticed personally, and maybe it's just a me issue, I don't know. Overall, I think this deck is pretty standard. There's nothing in here too wild or too out there. The embellishment drinks have been becoming more popular, so more people are playing them. Everything else feels pretty normal. We got the Tearful Mouse, we got the Resentment, we got the guy that helps you bind and get through more of your orders into hand. We got the Regalia's piece. This definitely helps the deck a lot. Kind of funny, they do run one blue. You can actually get it out, so you can use her to get this and this out, which is actually pretty nice. Or you can get the Zorka mask out, whatever you're searching for. All right, so here we have premium. This is not too surprising either. I know some people wanted Ballista on the charts. Ballista did not make it on the chart. Melista, sorry, I should say Melista, because it is a little different from the Ballista one in standard. But anyway, so this is 3 Magnolia, 3 Mega Colony, 3 Link Joker, 1 Dimension Police, and 1 Neo Nectar. Now, for this one in particular, this all honestly makes sense to me. DP actually has an amazing matchup into Bugs, along with a pretty good matchup into Narukami as well, because those numbers just get really big. Perfect guards aren't really as obtainable, so you kind of just fold a lot easier. Also, I think DP has a good matchup into Link Joker as well. So overall, this all makes sense. Neo Nectar, obviously with the Katrina unrestriction, is going to be performing here and there, though I will say Neo Nectar kind of folds to Ghidorah, so I would be very scared to take Neo Nectar, and I think part of this person took it probably not being aware of how many bugs players there might be. The Link Joker one might be a little bit more surprising. The Link Joker, the Chaos Breaker can like remove markers, so I think that's actually very useful into the stride mechanic stuff, so which is very interesting that you can just kind of play around certain stuff with that. But here's what top 4 looks like. First being Bugs, which this is the Flag Colony Bugs. We'll talk about this in a second. We had second place with DP, third place with Chaos Link Joker, and we have fourth place Peter with Bugs as well. Peter being a very big Bugs player. This all makes sense to me. This all honestly this is pretty fitting. It's actually very interesting. We haven't seen a meta like this in a bit, where it's just like straight up like Bugs and Link Joker and DP. DP also has a lot of like control-ish board states that it can do with like Taser and like the bike and like also Hanoi, so that's also something to keep in mind. So I don't know what this list looks like, if they kind of went more the control route, or if they're kind of stuck to just DP being DP. But let's go ahead and take a look at this this first place Bugs list, because a lot of people I've been talking about it. Fun fact, guys, last year around this time I was actually testing Flag Colony because I just thought it was a really cool deck to test. I thought it was interesting. I did say at the time it was extremely glass cannon. I think I still feel that way for the most part, but I did look over this just a little bit. I just want to show you guys sort of what it looks like. So this is the Flag Colony bug list. So you're running basically the flag bird for the name and the persona. Everything else doesn't really matter about it. I don't think you ever actually used all these effects. I didn't when I was testing this. I'm assuming you don't in this as well. But you see, you do it for name, because then you have inlet, you have flag, you have the restand assault here. Basically, you can restand both of these just to get more attacks under the whatever this guy's name is, the Ant Mantis or whatever this is. Oh, the mega this guy. You basically under this you put your opponent's Vanguard lower, and then also have the persona, and just big beefy numbers. Big beefy boys. And then also red OT carries really hard here, because that's another extra attack, by the way, that you can get if you hit that if you let that go off. And then obviously you can also restand these guys with like cards like these. They are running this girl right here, the Battler S. A lot of people have been kind of pushing more towards this card. Keep in mind, there's have an errata on here. It actually shows the errata. On the actual card does not, so just keep in mind your opponent does draw a card for this effect. But what's cool about it is that you can bring her back out. You can play the grade 2 game really well. I've been asking some Buck players sort of about her, and I'm starting to understand more of why people run her. Darkface obviously is really OP in this deck. This card is just disgusting. It makes Highlander like a really hard deck to play. I'm gonna be real with you. Let's go ahead and look at this DP list real quick. I am curious to see how heavy it was on the control aspect, if it was going towards that aspect or not. odd if they played like a more regular DP game. I am curious. I used to play DP a lot, so this was definitely one of my favorite decks. And it does run some of the control. The only thing that's not in here is the bike. It's a grade 1 bike that basically says you can still blast retire it. It counts as a PG. Instead, they're running the Zeal package, actually, instead, which is actually also really interesting. And they still have the taser in here so they can rest stuff. This goes around like a lot of like multi-attack decks really easily, including decks like Highlander as well. This shuts down Highlander decks pretty easily. But they can bounce it back, but you can also rest it, just be annoying. But yeah, the Zeal package is very interesting here. You can kind of just, I do think this is still priority. But I guess minusing your Vanguard is also just an interesting side thing. I guess side thing you could do. You also draw a lot more. You'll see a lot more of your deck. This is really interesting. This is also kind of like that more of the control-y aspect of DP that you can play, where you force your opponent to use resources, and if they don't, you get to draw a card and minus their Vanguard. On grade 3, you get to do both. On grade 2 and prior, you can only do one. That's what's really good. Really good. Obviously, wanting the Laurel is like the win con of the deck. You basically once the DP player sees that, it's kind of an OTK turn. But this is what V looks like. That's probably my strongest format. I have the most to talk about here, so I might sit on this a little bit more. So we have 2 golds, 1 Bermuda, 1 Gear Chronicle, 1 Great Nature, 1 Aqua Force, 1 Royal Paladin, 1 Narukami. Honestly, that looks pretty healthy to me. I do like the fact that there's a bunch of diversity here. All very good decks. I think the only one I will question for days and days and out is the Gear Chronicle one. It's just that stuff just actually just blows my mind. I like the thing about the Gear Chronicle one is that the Gears was around prior to all the good stuff, right? And it wasn't really performing too well. Like it wasn't performing at all. And then now we take one card, we add the new cards and we take some cards out. And somehow it's actually still topping, which is pretty wild to me, because at the end of the day it's just a multi-attack force deck, I guess, and it really needs to find a bind zone to kind of do stuff now, and it's not as easy to find a bind zone now, but I guess it just does enough to keep it going. I will say one thing: the grade 4 that gives the 25k shield is really massive, and I think that's probably the biggest thing that keeps the deck alive for as long as it does, because that card is just insane. You can also kind of support a little bit with Karuta and a couple other cards, so I think that makes the deck kind of a little bit more viable, but it still just kind of surprises me that the deck performs as much as it does. Golds might be a little bit surprising to people, but actually I think Golds is really good. I talked about it before, but Golds is actually stronger than people may think. One of my teammates took Golds, and they're performing really well under it. And this is someone that didn't touch V all year. Last time he touched V was like literally last year. We were competing, and we topped last year, and he was on Golds last year too. But that was when Percival was around, and then he picks it up again, and he was still performing really well with it, even without the Percival. So sometimes you just go get skill, you know, top 5, do your thing, you know. So it just goes crazy. Anj, which is Bermuda Triangle. Anj is actually, I think Anj is one of the better decks right now in terms of like decks you want to compete with. Been testing it more, and I've been starting to see the light on it more. I'm starting to understand just that is actually not like as vanilla as like, and not as vanilla, I would say. It actually is very impactful. I think you have to build a certain way, you have to pilot it a certain way, you have to know the matchups very well. I think the deck actually, there's a lot of thought behind it that people may not know about. Great Nature, obviously it's been showing results, it's going to show results again. Great Aqua Force also very clear. Thoughtless is just really strong. Then we had Royals, which is Jewel Knights. Jewel Knights is also insanely strong with the guard restrict. And Narukami might be a little bit less. I think Narukami is a little weaker out of the 8 here. But if it goes first, it kind of goes crazy. So first place we had Anj, second place we had Golds, which is Sergio, and then third place we had the Steam main player, and fourth place we had Javon with Great Nature. So honestly, this is all this all makes sense to me. Now keep in mind the Great Nature player is actually running the OTK list. They're running the Gorilla and all that stuff, so basically they ride and they kind of kill you on that same turn. They don't though usually flop because their hand isn't looking too well, because it's a lot of grade 3s. It's a lot of fake shield. The deck is strong, but it's a lot of fake shield. Anj list here. Now I already looked at the Anj list myself. This is a very standard, like to the T, no weird shenanigans Anj list is the best way to put it. The cookie cutter list is the best way to put it. So this is the cookie cutter list. There's no weird stuff in here. I think the weirdest thing is probably maybe the draw. Everything else is just like the put good cards to deck. So we have Anj at 4, we have Tira at 3, we have the Syria, which is good for the slice for fighting Anj, we have the Aqua at 4, we have the Weasel at 4, we have Nikita just to help with the Swiss, since we have a bunch of soul in here. All of these cards are soul cards, so you can just, get a lot of shield, just a really good card to have. Vanessa also to send back the Tira, Ellie just because Ellie's shield's good, Sedna for the searching, and then we have this girl right here. This is the promo, this is Qual. She's on play, so you can soul charge, and then you can, when you run upon, you can pop her out. This card's actually insane. I think people really underestimate this card. People are running it cards, don't get me wrong, but I just want to emphasize just how good this card is. She makes Aqua like 10 times better, because sometimes you'll ride Aqua and you'll have a target. Guess what? She is your target. Like, it's just insane how much this card does. Everything else is pretty standard. You got the crits, got the one end of draw. I personally support the draw. If you think you're gonna see a lot of mirrors, the draw is actually insane. It also helps you find Anj faster. This deck flops if it doesn't find Anj. This deck also flops if you don't find normal units in time. So the draw just really helps you kind of stay like more sustained. And on top of that, sometimes you can just use her as a discard for a Tears effect and just not really care. And it's fine because it's just a 5k, because you will use Tears effect enough to where you'll be discarding good cards sometimes. So why discard bad cards when you can? Why discard good cards when you can discard cards like this instead? So this makes it a lot easier. Overall, I think this deck is like pretty good. This shield is 25k shield, by the way, on top of this shield, which is like 20k shield. Like, dude, you are just like swimming in shield. You're just having a swimming shield party. It's like basically what Steam Mains is doing with their grade 4, except you're doing it with the grade 1. It's actually kind of cracked. Just letting you know. This Nikita goes wild. That's why the Qual is good, because Qual is a free units board and a soul charge, which fuels everything else. I love it so much. Anyways, that's the Anj list, and then we also had the Sergio's list, which is just golds, and then we can look over this Gear Chronicle list real quick just to kind of see what kind of huffing and puffing they were doing with their maidens gear love. So as I mentioned earlier, there's probably gonna be Karuntas in here, which they're running the Karuntas. Everything else is pretty standard actually. They're running the Lost Break Dragon here just to help with that bind, which this definitely helps with that bind. See this card to help with that bind, and hopefully you're not binding a bunch of triggers. Very, very useful card. You kind of need it now. Still running the 3-1 with the Heal Guard, which makes a lot of sense. Nabu's in here, the Gear Dog's in here to find this. Overall, it's just a standard list without Entrahana basically. And instead of Entrahana, you're running the other good cards, which in this case is Karunta. And this is basically the replacement for Entrahana. So it went place from hand, sadly. Obviously the Entrahana was like 10 times better because you just bind from anywhere all the time, you call from anywhere, just do your thing. But this card actually I think is a really good substitute, because you see it a lot. You will be going through your deck quite a bit. You'll eventually find it. The only downside is if you have to ever call it over like off from this into something, I don't know, if you ever have to call it any other way, it just kind of sucks. But I think the biggest thing is that this card just really, this is probably one of the cards. This card makes Lost Break Dragon just a lot worse, but this card definitely helps. But anyway, overall this is a very standard list. They also running the draw. I support the draw here too. I like this draw in this deck as well. I think it really helps. It helps find your pieces faster, and then yeah, obviously Karunta helps you search your deck a lot faster. Opponent's gonna give you damage. Guess what? You're gonna be searching your deck. It's great. Just don't ride it. Maybe there's something behind Steam Mains that I just don't know. Maybe I gotta rebuild mine back up and see what I can do with it. Who knows? Maybe there's some kind of sauce here. Maybe Steam Mains is just still good. Anyway, other than that, that's it. I do want to show you guys what a Hyrule version of Great Nature looks like, because I think a lot of people just don't know about Hyrule Great Nature as much. I have known about it for a while, because when I first saw Leopold come out, it's like the first thing I tested. I was like, I wonder what Gorilla would be like in this deck. I do that with every Great Nature deck. I'm like, wow, that's a new Great Nature card. It'd be crazy if I put a Gorilla in there. Well, by the Gorilla, I mean this Gorilla, to be specific. It says at the end about your Vigor attack, you Soul Blast 5, restand all of your 25k or greater rear guards, and if you restore 2 or more, retire all of your opponent's rear guards. This card's kind of nutty. It retires, and then it also restands the whole board basically. Pretty except Vigor. So yeah, this is pretty standard. There are running, so in order to kind of keep this deck going with the soul, you have to run this card. This card lets you put a card from hand to soul to kind of to give this unit power. And then you also, if you have 2 additional circles, you also draw a card. You'll always have 2 additional circles as long as you ride Leopold, so you'll usually be okay on that aspect. Reverse Leopold, to be precise. Soul made a big discussion about this card, and I totally 100% agree with him, everything he said. He basically said, like, your additional circle wants to have other cards. They don't want this card. However, there's one exception to that deck, or whatever the standard of Leopold is in this deck. This deck isn't running the Tester Fox. It's not running the Tester Fox or the Grade 2 that lets you find the Tester Fox. So basically the Giant works better here because it's numbers. But yeah, overall, very, very interesting deck. It's you definitely want to run fronts, and as you can see, they're running the fronts in here. This is definitely a front-focused deck. You want to hit at as many fronts as possible. You want to be able to restand your whole board. Your board usually will be hitting over the threshold, and that's probably another reason why they're running this, to kind of help hit over that threshold. But that's that, and I think that's it for this. I think that's all I had. I just really wanted to talk about this. Thought it was a really good way to start off the season. I think everything we saw in terms of tops was all really good so far. It all is definitely showing the meta, and I think all the decks we've seen so far are all good. We might see a little bit of shifting happen in premium a little bit, especially with like Hanoi and stuff like that. We'll have to see sort of what people start doing when they start seeing these types of decks come up, how they're going to start reacting to them, because now with Hanoi being different, people are going to start reacting differently to their deck building, which I think is just a really cool concept that has been introduced that we haven't had before as much. that's it for this video. Kind of talked a lot about meta here. This is the beginning of BCS meta. I had a lot to say. Don't forget to shop at pithycards.shop for any other goodies that you need for your BCS upcoming adventures. If you need any traveling stuff, or if you need any sleeves or under sleeves or deck boxes or whatever else that he has a bunch of stuff on his website. Do not forget to check it out, because now is the time to be shopping for all your goodies to compete. So yeah, anyway, bye guys.